You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to episode 97 of A Life in Ruins podcast, where you investigate the careers of those living a life in ruins. I am your host, Connor Johnin, and I am joined by my co-host, David Howe. Carlton would not be joining us on this podcast, and I can't even poke fun at him for it because he has a very legit excuse for not being here. For today's episode, we are joined by Nicholas Carbone, an undergraduate in anthropology at the University of Connecticut and TikTok personality. How are you doing on this lovely day?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, man. I think I told you this when I messaged you, but my mom grabbed her phone, brought it to me when I was visiting one weekend and was like, hey, this kid, you should do your videos like him. They're better. And I was like, God damn it. Oh, shit. Sorry, Chris. Hang on. We'll go back. And I was like, damn it. So, yeah, they're great, dude. And I saw like you posted 2 videos and like the next day you had like 100,000 subs. And I was like, whoa.
That was insane. For the record, I think yours are better because they're like funny.
Oh, it's all good.
No, like that was just absolutely surreal. I posted that video. It was the one about the Boylston Street fish weir. And I went to bed that night and I had 5 followers and like no views. I woke up the next morning with 1.5 million. And that was just a weird day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wait, it's 1.5 million now?
Oh, no, 1.5 million views, not followers. Yeah.
I was like, wow, dude, good for you.
Yeah, no.
So your TikTok obviously deals with prehistory and kind of topics like that. Where did this love of the past come from? Can you trace that like back to your childhood or anything like that? Definitely.
So I was definitely a history kid. I traced my origin story with archaeology back to when I was about 7 years old. Somebody let me watch the movie Titanic. Probably shouldn't have at 7. But yeah, so I watched that movie and just became like really infatuated with the Titanic. Just like really got really into it. And it was
pretty cool.
Yeah, it was the only movie I would watch like ever for like a solid year. I wouldn't watch like any other movie. And I like drew like in like 2nd grade. I was like drawing
French
like,
girls.
What was that? Oh no! Yeah, no, not French girls. No, I would draw these like vivid like pictures of like the Titanic sinking, and it would like freak out my parents. So I think that was like a very formative experience. Like the concept of like, I think I was just really fascinated by the idea that there was like this ship that like used to be like really lively and inhabited, and now it's at the bottom of the Atlantic and is just abandoned and has been left a shell. So I kind of got interested in history too from my grandfather. He was always into like World War II and that kind of thing. I moved into a house, like a new house when I was a kid as well. And it was on top of a hill. And the foundation was from the 1920s. Like it was like a newer build, but the foundation was from like the 1920s. And one day I was playing in the backyard and like on the hill, I found this like lump of coal. And I was like really like fascinated by it. So like I ran inside and like asked my dad, I was like, why is there coal in the backyard? And he's like, oh, it's from when like, the house in the 20s like used to be heated by like a coal furnace. And I was just so like fascinated by that idea. Yeah. And so I would spend hours like in the backyard, like digging up coal and like putting it in like plastic like Ziploc bags and just keeping it in my room. I had this whole collection. It was just so fascinating to me. And then, and when I was a little later on, I read the Percy Jackson series, if you're familiar with that.
I just read those this last year.
Oh, yeah.
I just went on a bender and read all of them. They're fantastic.
No, they're great books. So that got me into like Greek mythology, and which got me into ancient Greece, which got me into just classical antiquity in general. And I've loved that period ever since. And then so I just kind of my interest in history developed from there, and subsequently my interest in archaeology stemmed from my interest in history.
Very cool. I think the Titanic movie does a really good job of showing like obviously the wreck and showing archaeology and how it preserved and stuff. I thought that they really did an excellent job at that in the movie and kind of inspired folks. I'm glad it inspired folks like you to, pursue it further. Also, I wasn't allowed to watch the second VHS because there was too much death.
Yeah.
Right. It was two VHSs. I don't remember seeing it. I remember seeing it and my parents making me close my eyes at that scene, or one scene. And then I just don't remember any of the movie other than violence.
Yeah.
I need to watch it again. But at the end, is there did they show you the wreck or something?
Yeah, it's actually at the beginning too. It's there's this, because it starts in the 1980s and they go down in the submarine, and it's and then it shows you the wreck in the submarine.
Oh.
But it was funny, whenever I would watch it, I would just skip to the end, where the boat was sinking. I would just didn't care about the plot at all.
Yeah.
That's the part that my parents were it was just too mortality inducing or something, people jumping off the back and getting speared by the propellers. It
was gruesome.
Oh. Yeah. I'm gonna have to watch this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really don't think I remember any of it. I'm gonna have to watch that. I was gonna say though, so you're putting coal into Ziploc bags. So I want the record to reflect that Nicholas Carbone is excited about carbon.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if Carbone or Carbone in Italian means carbon. I can't remember.
It does. I can verify that.
It does?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was around Italian a lot when I was a kid, so it's just a little bit. But yeah, I guess you're from Boston, right?
I'm from Connecticut. I'm currently living in Boston now, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you like that? I mean, I grew up in the Northeast. Actually, my tangent here was going to be that you have all that cool stuff in your backyard. It's always a little interesting to me. Out east, there's so much archaeological history. I mean, post 1492, a little historically. And then out west, it's not so much, and what was that like as a kid? And I remember going to Paul Revere's house in Boston and stuff all the time.
Yeah. So that's what's interesting to me about New England archaeology in general, is that people conceive of New England as being this really old part of the country, right? It was, the Puritans and Plymouth Colony and whatever. But at the same time, people don't conceive of it as having an ancient past, really. And because it's really easy to miss, with all the suburban sprawl and just it's very you feel very disconnected from ancient, the ancient past of the place. And which is why I love doing New England archaeology, is because it reminds people that this place has been here. It's just as old as everywhere else. And it's just right under our feet if you know where to look.
Yeah.
That's what we had Heather Rockwell on a couple episodes back, and I will figure out which one that is. But yeah, she studies the small subset of which is the Paleo-Indian period of New England, which is even a smaller niche than even just prehistory of New England.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So it's cool. So there's a lot of, do you feel like you're on the cutting edge sometimes because folks don't do a lot of that kind of research?
Yeah. I mean, so I've personally never worked on any pre-contact sites, but I have been around, I've been in the lab and they talk about it, and it's and we have all the, a bunch of stuff in the lab, full of artifacts and whatever. And it's it's just, I feel very immersed in it. And yeah, so I mean, I've never done really any hard research pre-contact yet, but I would like to eventually.
The video you posted about the fishery that was prehistoric, or I'm sorry, pre-contact, was pretty sick. I'd never heard of that, and I was like, whoa. And also I was like, this kid is screwed in. That was a really good video. But
thank you. Yeah. So that's the thing that I think what resonated about that video, at least for me, was people don't think of because that's the thing, Boston's an old city and it's one of the oldest cities in the United States, but at the same time you don't think of it as being an ancient place, right? So I think people were just kind of when I made that video, I think the reason it was popular is just people were struck by the fact that even in the middle of the city there's ancient archaeological heritage from 5,000 years ago, right beneath the center of downtown. And I think that's partly what I love to do with my TikTok, is highlight history in places where people don't think of it as existing.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
So transitioning, you watch Titanic, digging up coal in your backyard. You're drawing these really intense drawings of ships and things like that. What ultimately led you to continue studying that and go to a undergrad? And did you initially go for history and archaeology when you first went?
Yeah, so it's funny. I actually initially went into college for political science with the mind that I was going to go into like public policy or like work in politics.
Cool.
And then about during my sophomore year, I just was like, I'd rather stab my eyeballs out than do that.
Was that around like 2016-ish, 20?
It was 2020 about, yeah.
20. Okay, that would definitely do it for me.
Yeah. So that was about actually, so here's the unfortunate thing was that it was about spring 2020. I switched my major into anthropology, and, spring 2020, it was like COVID was just ratcheting up. Mm-hmm. And I immediately, all of my classes were moved online, and I was online like purely for the next year. And so my first year of like being in anthropology was totally online, and I didn't like meet any of my professors, and it was just really kind of awful in terms of like getting to know people in the field.
That's a pretty common thing we're hearing, and it's interesting because Carlton isn't here because he's literally doing some PhD stuff right now. He went through it, and he was teaching and a student in like the COVID times, but Connor and I were like already done with school. And like we didn't see it, but from the guests that we've had on and like talked during the in between segments, it's like it's a crazy thing to deal with. And I'm like any kid that like or any student right now in school, like I'm proud of them. It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think anthropology and archaeology is a really hands-on, or it's taught well when it's hands-on, exciting, fun. And it's got to be so hard to actually get that out via Zoom or whatever you're doing. Like I would fall asleep, and I love archaeology, but like I would sleep through like an archaeology, like a prehistory lecture right now. And so I commend you folks who have gone through it and continue to go through it, because like it just would not work for me, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I was taking archaeology labs like remotely, trying to do lab stuff. Like it's just like,
how do you do like picking up skulls and stuff? Or
they would send us like PDFs like with like data on it, and then like, oh, like make sense of this, or like they made it work somehow, but it was just really lousy.
Wow,
it was not fun.
Well, could you imagine doing like bioanth without being able to touch like the skulls?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I had a human evolution class, and it was like when we had like labs, and we had to do a lot with like, measuring bones and that kind of thing. And it was, they had to like figure out how to do that on like a PDF. It was
yeah. Dang. I remember sitting right next to Connor in our bio class, like picking, and our teacher was like passing us, not to rub it in, but like passing different hominid skulls, and we were like, you get to touch and like see them and stuff. But that's like the magic of it to me. But yeah, being able to do that on Zoom, I'm assuming, and then still be into it that's cool.
Yeah.
So did they make it? So how did you kind of keep your interest, or were you just so interested in it that you just kind of kept pursuing it as part of it?
I just love it, and I just kind of, because at the same time, like, yes, having classes online was terrible, but at the same time, it was also nice because I didn't have to like leave my room before 7 a.m. but yeah, no, like learning wise and like education wise, it was definitely a detriment.
Did you get to do a field school? I guess before that? Okay.
Oh, no, I actually did it this summer, 2021.
Okay, cool.
And it was awesome. Loved it.
Yeah. I guess for the audience, like what kind of stuff you do?
Yeah. So we were working on this site in Mystic, Connecticut. It is actually pretty amazing preservation wise. It was a single component Pequot domestic site that was hastily abandoned in 1637 during the Pequot War for obvious reasons. What happened was that we actually, not me, but my professor and his people he was working with, found the site based from a historical document left behind by an English soldier who had briefly mentioned it in this document where he was talking about like we came across, like after this battle, they came across this, he said like several houses and burned them. And going off of that, like through battlefield archaeology, he like retraced exactly the site that he was talking about, which is really really interesting.
That's the fun thing about historical. Like you got like written records and stuff to like match up. And I assume when those match up, you're like, well, hell yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. And actually what's really crazy about it is the site was, so like it was on the battlefield. And so like all around the battlefield, they found like musket shot and arrow, like these like brass arrow points that were like bent backwards, like fully bent backwards from hitting something.
Damn.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And I was excavating like the shell middens at the site. And even like in the float samples that I was doing in the lab, we would find impacted musket shot, like bird shot, those small little pellets. Yeah. So we know it was defended. It was not inhabited at the time. It was attacked, but it was defended is what we think. So it's a once in a lifetime site. It was a bit heavy working there, I would say, because of like the context of it.
Right.
But no, it was really, I'm grateful that it was my first experience in archaeology because it's just and that's the thing too, it was completely, it's never been plowed or anything. So it was undisturbed. It's just like this single moment in time, like frozen basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool, man. Let's end the segment on that because that's pretty cool. And then the next one, let's get more into what you did in undergrad. Welcome back to episode 97 of the Life in Ruins podcast. I'm lost without our captain, Carlton, but I'm trying my best. Here with Nicholas Carbone. And he told me in the DMs when I hit him up about this that you actually did listen to the podcast before, or you do actively. Before we get into some New England stuff, I want to know, what is that like? And I'm sorry.
Well, actually, I found you guys because I originally listened to the Dirt.
Okay.
And Carlton went on the Dirt one time and pitched. He didn't pitch it, but I found out about you guys through Carlton going on the Dirt, and I've been listening ever since. I love you guys. Yeah, no, I love this podcast.
No, we appreciate it. I think Carlton described David's podcasting style as Joe Rogan, where he takes like the PBS Eons kind of approach in that interview, which I thought was hilarious.
Interesting, yeah. Yeah, that's cool to hear. It's like weird. We started the podcast 2019, so we haven't really gone to like a conference, or Connor and I haven't seen other archaeologists really. So it's like going to be weird when we go because apparently people listen to it. So
yeah, we're going to get a lot of hate.
Yeah, that's more what I'm getting at. You want to take over?
So you were also given other opportunities during your undergraduate career to do archaeology. Specifically, it looks like you did some stuff in some more New World archaeology, kind of working in, I think it's in Connecticut, right?
Yep.
With that independent study. Do you mind talking about that and what kind you did for that?
Yeah. So the independent study that I did, it was actually just a continuation of the field work that I did over the summer. We had hundreds of like float sample bags to just like go through. And I was doing that the entire semester because when we were excavating these shell middens, like we just kind of just bagged them all. And so I was going through and, sorting all the soft shell clam and the oyster and the ceramics and the animal bones and like the faunal stuff and all separate stuff into separate, bags and weighing them and whatever. So that was like kind of the tedious aspect of it. But I was also doing a bit of research as I was doing that. And so I was looking at the ceramic diversity at this site because we were able to deduce few different discrete individual households at the site. There's about 3 of them, and each household had a shell midden associated with it. So it was like the shell midden of the house, and each shell midden, obviously, because they're different families, they had different waste disposal patterns and like different habits. And what I noticed when I was going through the bags was that there was a lot of diversity in the ceramic types that they were using. Some of the ceramics had shell temper in them. Others had grit temper. Others had no discernible temper. And so I just kind of wanted to figure out why that was. Also, there was like different design elements on some of them as well. But yeah, I just wanted to figure out like why, like what was accounting for the diversity. And I didn't get super far with it. I kind of, the paper I wrote, I just kind of pitched a bunch of different like hypotheses as to why this could be. I mostly was like, oh, like this, the grit temper could have a different functional.
Like it was purposeful for something. Yeah.
Yeah. Like better. Yeah. Better for some things than others. And, or like, the different design elements could be different, kinship networks or whatever. And again, I was working with a pretty limited sample size because there wasn't actually a ton of ceramics to come out of that site. So, I was grasping at straws a little bit sometimes, but, I had a fun time doing that.
Grasping at sherds.
yeah, exactly.
For the audience listening who's non-archaeologists, a shellman essentially is kind of just a dump, right? Like it's like where they put the shells they were like cracking open and then some junk.
Yep.
In the southeast here, you find dogs in them, you find people in them. Not that they were cracking open the people, but they just threw people in the dump sometimes. And then to the word temper, right? That's like the stuff you put into pottery to bind it, and it's usually sand or shell or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a cool thing, man. Did you find any like thing, like what was the best takeaway for you? Or like what did you like most about it?
So when I was sorting the bags, it was interesting because we'd find like really like tiny minuscule stuff that you'd never get in a sifter. So I found a few these like Dutch glass trade beads from like, the 1630s.
Nice.
Yeah. I found like, again, like I said, like impacted musket shot and, like little bird bones and stuff. But I personally liked, like working with the ceramics the most because it was just, I don't know, because it felt like someone like touched this and like made this and crafted this vessel, and like now I'm touching it. It's just really kind of it's corny, but it's kind of like an emotional experience. Like when there's like 400 years separating you from this person who last touched it. It's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Carlton, if Carlton was here, he would call arrowheads the poor man's ceramics because you can learn so much about ceramics. You can learn about the local environment, studying the temper. You can really date pretty well using OSL and things like that, what time they came from. Like you said, there's those individual design aspects that are really, really interesting. And we, out west, at least where I was working in Wyoming, there's like the whole state is described under brownware, which is like, that's there's like no diversity out there. So it's cool to hear that there is that sort of diversity out there, and at least within the same site and within the same group of people.
Yeah. No, New England ceramic, like especially in the like during the contact period, the New England. I have a lot of criticisms of the ceramic like typologies, but it gets very convoluted, and there's a lot of diversity like around that time for a variety of different reasons. But yeah, no, there's a lot to. The only thing is though is that ceramics don't preserve terribly well in New England because of the weather here. I think it's just like, the constant freezing and thawing, and also the fact that New England ceramics are relatively thin and they just shatter. Like there's just bazillion pieces. You'd never find a full vessel.
Do you guys get colonaware up there, or is it not?
I don't think we get that. I mean,
okay.
Is that like what kind of, is that from the Southeast, or is it?
It is down here, especially on the coast. It's like European, indigenous, and African like pottery styles like combined together.
Oh, interesting. No, I gotta look more into that actually. That's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's probably because there's more, I don't know why it would be. I mean, the African, sure, down south, but like the indigenous, I don't know. But yeah, I always thought that was a whole coastal thing, but yeah. Anyway, sorry, tangent. Connor, you're probably more on task than I am. Sorry, I looked at it two screens.
So you also got opportunities to do stuff that is not specifically New England archaeology. Specifically, you also studied the Etruscan populations and kind of took a very different approach in studying something completely different than, ceramic sherds and burials like that. So do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, so that's kind of a funny story. So when I was initially going into archaeology, I went in with the mind that I was going to do like classical archaeology. I wanted to study the Mediterranean. And so like the first research experience that I came across was like this professor, and he was asking like if anybody wanted to like do like a research project with him. And I said yes, like I'll do it. And I came up with this like research question, and I applied for this grant, and he was kind of my mentor or whatever. It was like very kind of hands-off experience. So it was like pretty much just on my own doing this. And I was like, oh, like, well, the Etruscans are pretty well known for, like gender, like not equality, but like women in Etruscan society were always like regarded as like they had more positions of power and they had like a greater kind of stake in things. Whereas like, the Romans were notoriously matriarch. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I wanted to figure out like if like the onset of like Roman rule in Etruria, that part of Italy where the Etruscans were, would be like detectable with the change in gender relations, if that makes sense. And I didn't really like get super far with it. My project was kind of all over the place. I was looking at epitaphs and like burial goods and like language. I got really in the weeds, and it was just, I bit off more than I could chew. I never even fully finished it completely, but it was fun. And then shortly afterwards, I realized I wanted to do North American archaeology after I finished that. So
yeah, that's cool, dude. I think all of us, like, it's why we asked the dinosaur history kid question in the beginning. Like, we're all, at some point, every archaeologist goes through like I'm really hyped on Greece and Rome stuff forever, like as a kid. And then like you'll do it. Like I wanted to do classics when I went to school, and I was like, well, I don't want to learn German. So but
I feel like there's like three categories. It's like Greek / Roman, and then you have the Egyptians, and then you have the Meso folks. So there's like all people that, there's probably another one too, but it feels like folks,
the sexy ones.
You're like, okay, I've seen this here. I watched movies on this. I did Gladiator, whatever, whatever inspires you. There always is, it seems like you fall in those categories, and you're like, oh, it's really complicated, it's really convoluted, and there's a lot of people in these disciplines. But if you're doing North American archaeology, like if you're doing it in the plains, there's like so much research you can be doing. And obviously you mentioned New England as well, that if you stay in North America and do prehistory or pre-contact or even contact era stuff, there's a lot of research to be done out there. So that's a cry to all our listeners, like, please study North American archaeology.
Definitely.
Yeah. I've told this to people that ask me these questions on Instagram a lot, but like, you'd think there are some areas where like people haven't gone to, but like Connor, like your thesis kind of like proves it as well. Like people have been here for at least 10,000, 15,000 years. So it's like, and upwards of 20,000 now, but someone's been in that spot and probably napped a flake, It's like, there's always something there.
Yeah, they just found a site in Connecticut, 12,500 years old, right along the banks of the Farmington River. So,
hell yeah.
Yeah, it's called the Brian D. Jones site. It's found a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, cool. Very cool. So you obviously, you just said, I want to do North American archaeology. And then you actually got to work doing collections, which is something David and I and Carlton have all done or dabbled in. Yeah, do you mind talking about that? Yeah,
so it was at this museum in Washington, Connecticut, called the Institute for American Indian Studies. And we were doing, so like they had this big assemblage in their basement from this rock shelter in the same town called Woodruff Cave that was excavated in the 1970s, like throughout the 70s. And they kind of like, they bagged all of the, like, because like they were interested back then, they were interested in finding like arrowheads and like, the glamorous stuff. And then they kind of just threw all of the debitage and like everything they didn't think was like super important in these big like paper bags and just like left them in a box for like 50 years. and then so I was applying to be an intern, and they're like, oh, like, we got a job for you. If you want to sort through this box of like moldy paper bags that's been sitting here since the 70s. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so it was cool. I got to like sort through and like classify all this lithic debitage from this cave. It's like dates from the I think it was like the early to late woodland period. Yeah, so it was like, there's chert and quartz and whatever. I found like some pottery that got mixed in there sometimes. And yeah, there was a couple like, calcine bone, but yeah, I did that, and that's kind of like my day-to-day work. I also helped out around the museum. Like I would help assemble and disassemble exhibits. What else did I do? And then there was also this assemblage of like pottery that they had, and like it needed to be sorted out and cross-mended and kind of just organized. So I helped with that too. So yeah, there's a lot of tedium, but what's archaeology if not tedium?
Right. I think I probably say this at least every other podcast, or not every other, but in our bigger ones. Collections guys, like listening, if you're wondering what kind of job like you can get in archaeology, or like what do I do, like look for collections jobs. And if you're at school, like take any opportunity to do anything collections based, because one, there's like billions of artifacts that need to get sorted, and like only so many archaeologists and so many tax dollars. And like in Connor's case too, we did it because we needed money in grad school and got like a job doing it, just like being a tech. But then it ended up employing me for the last 3 years, like with a 401k and stuff like that. So like it pans out for you. And yeah, so like good on you for doing that, because that's a skill that a lot of people just overlook because they just want to go dig. Yeah.
No, and I enjoyed collections. I mean, I did not mind the like kind of monotonous aspects of it because I thought it was pretty therapeutic, honestly. And I had a lot of fun with all my people who I was working with. Like they were all great. So yeah, no, it's a good time doing collections.
Yeah, well, and then the amount of paper brown bags that are in basements that are like actively molding and dying, like that is like Brian Schroeder, who's been on the podcast before, did his master's thesis on a collection that was in brown bags that was in the same sort of context that they wanted to look at all the bones, the bison bones. So they did the bison bones and they kept the lithics other places. And yeah, so there's always room and there's always work to be done in that sort of space, and there's money for it. Like David was well funded doing that stuff, and highly recommend that to anyone out there. So do North American collections, then you'll be solid. And on that note, I think we're going to end this segment, and we will be right back. This has been episode 97 of A Life in Ruins podcast. Welcome back to episode 97 of Life in Ruins podcast. We're talking with Nicholas Carbone. And on this, we obviously know of you because of TikTok, and we definitely want to talk about your experiences on TikTok, telling people and learning people about archaeology, for using the wrong verbs for that. But, that's it's just what it is. So what do you think is like some of the positives and negatives that you kind of have about creating content on TikTok?
Right. So when people like learn something or they get something out of it and like they let me know that, it's like a really rewarding thing, and it makes me like want to make more. But one of the hardest parts of doing it at the same time is that obviously TikTok is a very, it's conducive to like very short videos. And I try to keep mine like a minute or under, just because you can't hold people's attention for like longer than that, really, especially on topics like this. And it's really, really difficult sometimes, like fitting in all of the information that I want to fit into a video in under 60 seconds. It's like, it can get like really hard. And sometimes I spend like a day working on or more trying to figure out how to even word a script that I'm like writing.
So you write scripts?
I do. I write scripts, and then I don't know why I do. I should just get like a teleprompter or something, but I memorize them. And so I have to like take the time to memorize. It's like a whole process. So I could make it way more efficient. I just don't.
It comes off like I assumed it was just, you don't think you need a teleprompter, but I mean, it always helps, I guess. But.
Yeah, no, it's save time.
Yeah.
Well, it's really impressive to be concise and to get everything that you want into there. Like it hurts my brain. Like you guys doing that stuff is really, really interesting to me, because I always feel like I need to context everything, but you don't. If you're trying to teach folks, you can give them enough information to ultimately at least like lead them down the right rabbit hole.
Right. Exactly. And that's a big thing. Like on TikTok, there is a lot of like BS and misinformation. As I'm sure David knows, if anyone on TikTok knows, especially in archaeology.
Meds.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, and there's like a lot of like great creators who get in like who do really great work, like debunking and like conspiracy busting. Like, I know like Mauro Skeen, you guys had him on.
Yeah.
He does that.
He's
Mini Minute Man.
intense.
Yeah. They need, like, we need that, like, people like there to like, I'm not a very combative person, so I have a hard time doing it.
Yeah. We've reached out to Mini Minute Man too, to see if like he would want to come on, and he's a little more combative with people, or like would be, what's it combative? He's just more like, you're wrong, I'm really funny, here's why. And like we need that out there. I just don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, no, I'm the same thing. Like, I can't do it. I would just fold. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, I remember like when there was that person, oh my God, it was like
the Indigo Bruno saga.
Yeah. Or that one in the ancient Rome never existed. That one that happened too. That was There's a bunch of them. Yeah.
I didn't know that existed, and somebody tried to, like, they sent it to me and they're like, hey, are you familiar with this person, and can you get a hold of them so I can strangle them? And I was like, I've never seen that. Connor, are you familiar with this?
No, I have no idea what you guys are even talking about.
Nick probably knows more than me, but like it was this person saying that ancient Rome never existed. It was all Spain or something like that.
Oh, they were like, oh, it's an invention of the Catholic, like the medieval Catholic Church. Like, it was never a thing. They basically said like that, like ancient Rome was like a theme park invented by the church. And then, it was like a whole, they were like the main character of TikTok for like 4 weeks. It was really obnoxious.
Man,
there's a lot of bad takes out in this world, and that is probably the worst take. That's not, oh my God.
I get there was like hundreds of hours of like worth of videos that just went into taking apart that thing. And people like were asking me like, oh, like, Jake, are you gonna like make a response to this? Mm-hmm. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not getting involved. I'm just going to make videos about ancient Rome and offer this and just like ignore it. Cause the more, I didn't want to breathe more life into it.
Yeah. That's a good way to go about it. Like I have multiple like mentors that are like, just don't even mention the pseudoscience stuff, because like you're only giving it more air. I think, just like you said, but
unless you are like completely like going, like, if that's like your whole thing where you just deconstruct these, which is important and people need to do that. And I really commend people who can.
Yeah, that's not my personality as well. So it's like we had Dr. Anderson on who does a lot of that, and Archeo Wolf, I'm glad that those people exist. It's probably a very thankless job.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Bruno saga too was he was the kid that was like, I keep saying kid, but he was the guy that was like with the Easter Island heads, saying that they all have beards and it's connected to like the whole ancient civilization thing and yada yada. And like,
he had like the AirPods headphones that he hung right here.
Was he the one that was like always yelled super loud? He was always screaming into the mic. Is that him, or is that a different?
Oh yeah, and he's like what? How does that even happen? Yeah. I was like the one guy I like made responses to, because I was just like, oh my God. But we're friends now on like TikTok, and like we chatted it up, and he was like, that Mini Minute Man guy like ripped me up, and I was like, yeah, man. And he was like, I appreciated what you did, because you just made it funny. You didn't like rip me to shreds, and like we'll chat. But like his whole thing is like, he does like the universe is all math like videos and stuff like that. Yeah. So Easter Island wasn't his forte, but
he had a response video too, like where he mentioned you and was like, thank you for like teaching me, kind of thing. Right.
Yeah. I liked that. And that's what I liked about your TikTok too, man, is like, it's just your videos are consistent, you're teaching, and like you're thrilled about it. You're not like, I mean, I love Archaeo Wolf. Like I'll put it up and watch him just rip a kid to shreds. But then like, it's just a nice breath of fresh air to just learn something. And I think being that, extending the olive branch to those people who are just, completely like irreparably wrong. It's better than being combative, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know. And that's part of my kind of mission with it, is like, to the extent that I have a mission with this, is just like, I want to like fill people's feeds with like genuine, like as truthful as I can possibly make it. You know what I mean? Content. And that's getting to the heart of this, is like, I firmly believe that like archaeology is interesting and fascinating and really entertaining, like in its own right. Mm-hmm. And you don't need pseudoscience. You don't need like all this like just BS to like make it interesting. Because that's the thing, like with TikTok, like TikTok has the shortest attention span of any social media platform. Like your average TikTok user is not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's a goldfish. And unfortunately, because of that, and like all social media suffers from this, but like because of that, TikTok is, I think, especially susceptible to like misinformation and like conspiracies, because it's the most like tantalizing, eye-catching, clickbaity stuff that can like really catch you on the For You page. Mm-hmm. And like I think what I want to do with Dig the Past is just like show people that you don't have to buy into that to like have fun with archaeology and have fun learning about archaeology. Like you don't need that stuff to have it be entertaining. Like the truth and not the truth, but like the factual information and like science is like, you know, entertaining in its own right. And you don't, yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
I was just saying, I completely agree, because like you don't need aliens. It's just how people lived in the past and not knowing about that and trying to figure out little facets of it is something that is exciting enough for me to just exist as is, because it's so, like you said, it's interesting. It's fascinating. I don't need my aliens to come in there and tell me that things are different. It's just, that's what were you going to say, David?
Yeah, just saying the same thing. Like that's my whole philosophy with it. Like it's all, I almost thought you were going to say this too, but I mean, it's along the same lines. Anthropology is the study of humans. So like, therefore anything in anthropology could be presented in a way of like why this matters to you. Like astrophysics, some people are just never going to care, but like you can always say like, this is how people used to live, like as like families, or like they had dogs and stuff like that. And it's like relevant to you. And a lot of people miss the mark, not kind of capitalizing on that. And like good TikTok and YouTube channels and stuff like Stefan's and stuff like, that's good. It's and I think the videos or like the content that resonates with people the most is the stuff that's like most relatable. And like, like you said, David, like all of anthropology is relatable because it's humans. And so, yeah, no, totally. Yeah.
Well, and I think what you're talking about with like the stuff in New England, it also gives you a connection to where you live, like a physical connection to where you live. That's not just historical. It can be prehistorical. You know, it can really like trying to understand how people lived on a landscape to me, like hurts my brain, but it also fascinates me.
Yeah.
You know, I just picture little tracks in my head of like where people are walking and where they're moving through stuff like that. That's the sad place that is my brain.
And I do that too, you know, just envision like walking anywhere and just I stop for a second. I'm like, oh, what did this place look like 5,000 years ago, and trying to reconstruct the environment in my head and like reconstruct how people would have moved on the landscape. And yeah, I do that all the time. It's just archaeology brain. Like,
yeah, it sounds like you got it. You've got the itis with that. Yeah. we all think the same way.
So what was your favorite TikTok that you created? I know we like in our podcast, we try not to, we love them all equally, you know, except for the one with the guy who talks about the red thing, but we're not going to talk about Bernie Taylor. You know, that's a whole thing. We're not going to just not even going to deal with that. But what is your kind of favorite video that you created through this?
To be honest with you, I think it's the Boylston Street Fishweir, and that's my first one. And it's my first one that I posted. It's my favorite, but like, it really is just because I think it was on its face, it's like a relatively simple thing. It's like, oh, it's this like fishing contraption that like, you know, is underneath Boston. But like, it really resonates with me, one, because like I'm living in Boston right now, and like every time like I go past Boylston Street all the time, and it's so fascinating for me. Because like I found out about the Boylston Street Fishweir like a while ago. I never even knew it existed, and then I found out about it, and I was like, that's the most interesting thing to think about. Like, this used to be like this ancient shoreline. It looked completely, like 100% totally different from how it does now. What I love about that video is like, it kind of makes you like re-envision like the city and like think about how it used like what the landscape it makes you think about the deep time
Sure.
of the place. And I think that's just like my favorite like thought exercise is just thinking about like how deeply ancient everywhere you go is. Like every single place that you walk has been there for forever, really.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
As a kid, like in New York City, like I saw a little plaque. I forget what museum it was at, or maybe it was just at Central Park, but what Manhattan looked like when people would have from Europe like arrived.
Yeah.
And like it's just like to think about the skyline of Manhattan, the entire island is just metal right now and concrete. Yeah. But before that it was just trees, and like Boston was the same way.
Well, Boston was an island, like at least in like the 1776.
Really?
Like it was like there was like a small little isthmus that I think actually went to Boston proper. Even in like the 1700s, it's been built up and things like that. So even like that short amount of time, it's changed like that. It's crazy.
Yeah, no. That's all filled. Yeah, you're right. That's all filled in. Yeah. David, that's the Manhattan Project, right? It was like where they did like 1609, it was like when Adrian Block.
Oh, it's something big that I remember like hearing about or seeing somewhere as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that I would love to see applied like more like in more places, because I love paleo environmental reconstruction stuff in general. And so, yeah, that's so interesting to me.
It really is. And I guess, Donnie Dust, right? Like on TikTok, the guy who makes all the tools and stuff. We had him on, and like one of the cool things that we chatted about was like knowing the indigenous people and like about the culture and the history of the area you're at. If like civilization were to collapse, or like, just something like an EMP, just any kind of disaster, how to survive in that area just solely based on archaeology. Like, here's how you build houses. Here's how you get the food. Here's like, and I just wish more people knew that. So I guess that's your goal too. Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like, there's history everywhere. And that's why I obviously I'm interested in North American archaeology, and that's why I post about it. But at the same time, I also post about it a lot because obviously most of my audience is in the United States. And there's this like really like kind of sad conception that like you have to go somewhere else to experience archaeology or to experience history or like deep time. Like, oh, like, like I want to go, like as cool as Italy is, or as cool as Greece is, and like in terms of its archaeology, it's right here. It's right here if you know where to look. It's under the suburbs. It's under Manhattan. Yeah, no, it's just such, and that was like such a cool, and that's why I kind of switched like to doing North American archaeology. That's just such a like intellectual, like just like thought provoking thing to study. Yeah. Keeps you up at night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll kind of segue to ending the show. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. But before we end the show, what are a couple sources that you would recommend for anyone interested in anthropology and archaeology?
First, I would recommend Connecticut's Indigenous Peoples, What Archaeology, History, and Oral Traditions Teach Us About Their Communities and Cultures. That's by Dr. Lucienne Lavin, who I met actually briefly. She's I don't know what her director or something. She was like in charge of the Institute for American Indian Studies where I worked. And that's also a really good it's kind of like an introductory book to Connecticut archaeology for anyone who's like from New England, like Southern New England in general, who's like interested in the archaeology of Connecticut, or like where like local to you. Yeah, no, that's a great book. Lots of pictures. And it's that's a really good one. Mm-hmm. Then I would also say Becoming an Archaeologist: A Guide to Professional Pathways by Joe Flatman.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, it's like a little career advice book that I found really helpful. I probably read it. I should have read it sooner than I did, because it gives you like a rundown of like the realities of working in CRM, the realities of trying to like get a job in academia, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was an eye-opening read, and it was very like in your face, like real, like, like look, like this is the reality of the situation. It's not easy. But yeah, so that's a really good one. Like if you're like a prospective or like if you're an undergraduate like me, definitely read that. And then lastly, David, I loved your YouTube video. It was like Anthropologist Explains ADHD, Depression, and Imposter Syndrome short film.
Yeah.
That got me through or helped get me through my last semester with all that research. As someone who also has ADHD.
I could tell.
Yeah. And yeah, it is just like, yeah, that I felt very seen. And actually I've discovered you first through YouTube. Okay. And then, because like I had like I had like passively like watching your YouTube channel, like for the last like 6 months or whatever. And then like then I saw you on TikTok and whatever. But yeah, no, that's a great video. I loved that. That was really well put together.
That's going to make me cry. I didn't realize like it was that impactful to people.
Yeah, no, that helped. That really helped me. Cool.
Damn. Didn't know that. I also didn't see that my name was on here. I just saw the big Anthropologist Explains. Damn. Well, I appreciate that. I had that whole idea, ADHD wise, like came to me in the shower, and I was like talking to myself as the prehistoric dude and me just like arguing, and like I'm fully insane. And I was like, I have to record this. Or I filmed that whole thing like in a night because I was just, I have to get it out. Yeah, I appreciate that. I was gonna say to you the whole time, like, you remind me of me, and like your videos are so articulate. They're really well researched. Clearly got a good head on your shoulders with everything you've been doing. So I don't know you, but I'm proud of you. Keep it up.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And your sweater game is on point.
Right. Me and Connor wanted to talk about that. Yeah.
That's thanks to my partner. She picks out all of my sweaters. So I'm not taking credit for it.
Well, it's awesome. Keep it up.
Yeah.
And where can our listeners find you on social media?
So you can find me at Dig the Past on TikTok. I don't have a YouTube or Instagram yet, but I'll make those soon at some point. Okay. So yeah, go to my TikTok and follow me on TikTok.
Instagram is where us old people are. So it's fun on there. But.
The OGs. Because this is a Life in Ruins, we have to ask you the most daunting question that you'll ever be asked. So if you were given the chance again, would you still choose to live a life in ruins?
100%. Absolutely. There's some times where I'm like, I'm going into this field, I'm not going to make any money, but then it's like, you can't put a price tag on like what an anthropological education gives you. It's just such a wonderful experience. So yes.
Okay. For sure.
Yeah.
So, we just interviewed Nicholas Carbone. You can find him at Dig the Past on TikTok.
Guys, you know what time it is. It is time for me to beg you to give us iTunes reviews on Apple, or podcast reviews, I should say. I will extend the olive branch. If you write us a review and send us a screenshot in the podcast DMs on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, or email us or smoke signal, I don't care, I will send you a sticker of the show. And Carlton now has a stack of freshly clean, matted A Life in Ruins podcast stickers, which he would gladly send you to. So that's a free sticker if you go to the podcast on Apple and give us a review so we can appease the Zuck. All right, thanks, guys. He doesn't run Apple.
Also, anyway. there's a place to give reviews or rate things on Spotify now. Please make sure and do that. And with that, we are out.
Thanks for listening to A Life in Ruins podcast.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Life in Ruins Podcast, and you can also email us at alifeinruinspodcast@gmail.com.
And remember, make sure to bring your archaeologists in from the cold and feed them beer.
Yeah, Connor, with the joke.
Yeah, I could do a joke. I could do a joke. So why should you never date a tennis player?
Why?
Love means nothing to them.
Ooh. Wow, that's pretty good.
Damn.
And with that, Connor, I think we're finally out.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Culturo Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.